Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of InEvent Talks. For those of you who don't know me, and even for the ones who do, my name is Deji, and I'll be your host for today. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, InEvent Talks is an original series by InEvent where we speak to guests who are thought leaders working in a number of diverse industries. We'd also like to say a big thank you to you, yes, you, who is joining us from somewhere in this massive world that we're in. And I'd like to ask you to please leave your location in the comment section because we'd absolutely love to know where you're tuning in from today. Now, today I'm joined by a special guest, Matthew Marson. And to start off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does. Now, Matthew is an experienced leader working at the intersection of technology, sustainability, and the built environment. Having founded WSP's Smart Places practice and grown Accenture's offering in this field, Matthew has most recently led a 100 million euro business unit across a range of asset types and geographies. Now, as an additional point, Matthew was also named the Royal Academy of Engineering's Young Engineer of the Year 2022 and the Institution of Mechanical Engineers Young Visionary 2016 for his contributions to the global smart buildings industry. As a recognized thought leader, Matthew is a keynote speaker at international industry events related to emerging technology, net zero design, and places at the building and city scales. He was an author in the Encyclopedia of Sustainable Technologies and a published writer in a variety of journals, earning a doctorate in smart buildings. Matthew, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Lovely to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I know you're joining from the UK today, and just considering all the recent events, I can imagine it's been a pretty interesting time.
Yeah, and a sad one as well, actually. Earlier we had the procession where they moved the Queen's coffin from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall. So yeah, a sad day here.
Yeah. I've been watching the news and just a lot of black and a lot of, just solemn gatherings and, just a very interesting historical time. But not to bum anyone joining, obviously it's rest in peace to the Queen. But yeah, it's been very interesting to watch. Now, just jumping straight into the questions that I have for you today, because I'm sure everyone joining is very curious to know more. I'll start with this. So you're the co-founder of Smart Building Bootcamp, right? And my question with that is what made you create a program to support built environment professionals and just like in delivering smart buildings like that make an impact? So what made you create that program?
Yeah, a couple of factors. The first one I think was probably pure frustration in trying to do some smart buildings projects. You had to spend a load of time educating the folks that you were working with to make sure that you got the outcome that you were looking for. And I think that probably talks to the sort of reason why that was needed in the first place, in the education in the built environment just kind of isn't fit for purpose anymore. We've got all of the fundamentals probably that we needed to be 20th century designers, but nothing on 21st century technologies. So you never study anything to do with the Internet of Things, what web tech might do, how systems come together, and it's purely fundamental now to the fabric of the spaces that we're designing. So I hope that it helps to fill some of the sort of legacy education gaps until universities catch up.
Nice, very nice. Thank you for that answer. I think I'm just gonna actually, you know what? Can you help me just contextualize what smart buildings are as well? Because I know, obviously, having to do research for this interview, that's a bit more like something that I know. But for the audience member who might not have as great of a grasp or an idea of what they are, could you just kind of contextualize that for us?
Yeah, it's a toughie actually, because you can pick sort of any technology that you'd like to go into your building and you could make it work in all sorts of different ways. So normally I think about it in terms of what does it do as a piece of technology towards the sustainability of your building, the way that you run or deal with your spaces, and then also what it can do for people, if that's around making them more productive, improving health and well-being in those spaces, or just making it somewhere that people really enjoy. So a bit of a woolly answer, but in summary, I would say technology that makes a space better than if it wasn't here.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for that. I just wanted to give some context, especially because I know that I might have skipped over just randomly over the topic that we have for today. So I just wanted to recontextualize that. So we're speaking to Matthew today about the 5 things he's learned from getting smart wrong. And that's a very wide reaching, thing that we don't necessarily have details for in the title, but if eventually we're just going to get more into it, and just his expertise on smart buildings will be able to just help us understand a bit more about that topic. So moving on from the first question that I asked, um, we saw on your LinkedIn account recently, I think about a month ago, that you were celebrating your PhD. So congratulations on that. And then your thesis, how smart buildings have evolved over the past decade. How did you get to this? What was the path traveled to focus on smart buildings for you?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you very much. It was good. Got it all finished with the Viva back in November last year, but obviously had to wait to the summer for my graduation, which
Of
was
course, yeah.
lovely for some photos. And it was basically a recording of what I'd sort of witnessed in the past decade of how things had changed and even the definition of smart buildings themselves, depending on the things that people were focusing on. So I've been really lucky to work on all sorts of sort of bonkers projects around the world, and basically saw how we'd gone from sort of energy management type use cases that we called corporate social responsibility back then, through to as we kind of came out of the financial crisis, that rents increased. So we were trying to pack people in into spaces and try to make them more kind of cool and groovy, like a WeWork. But then people felt it was a bit too much, and we felt like battery chickens. So we started to look at things around health and well-being, productivity, talent attraction and retention. And during that period was kind of publishing with some academics, and so was able to use that as a lot of the foundation to the research to prove what had kind of happened and changed in the past decade. And for me personally, I trained as an architect and engineer. I suppose that's where I learned buildings. And then from my the start of my career at Accenture is probably where I learned technology, and bringing those two things together.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thanks for that answer. I feel like I'm going to ask you a bit more about your why later on, because it feels like that is something that just kind of cuts across with every single guest that we've had on the show. But I'll make a mental note for that for later. I think the next question for me now would be, um, what was the first smart building, in your opinion, that deeply caught your attention, that just instantly had you just entranced, that you really wanted to know more about?
Yeah, and I would probably say that it is going to be a bit of a cliche answer. It's one that,
Okay.
if you know smart buildings, everyone's going to know. It's called the Edge in Amsterdam, and it was probably the first time that there was real success in technology driving the direction of how a space was going to work. So, from the developer OVG with Deloitte Digital as the anchor tenant, it was really successful in deploying IoT technologies and mobile apps for the first time that were fundamental to the running of a space, be that to do with how people dealt with their rooms or their desks, the quality of the air or the temperature that was being supplied, and just sort of knowing what's going on in those different spaces. It was an incredibly impressive feat as like the most notable first version of a smart building.
Nice, nice. I feel like we should provide an image for that later on, but I'm not going to hold on too much of that, because I actually haven't heard of the edge building that you described. But now that you mentioned it, this is something that I really want to see. Just plowing ahead to the next question. Um, so surely you've done several projects in the past that you're proud of, and I would typically just like to get a feel, just a bit of like the kind of projects that you've been on. So like, could you mention some projects that you've done in the past that you're very proud to have been a part of?
Yeah, I think the three that I'm probably most proud of is Oxygen and Neom, which is the industrial city that will go into that region of Saudi, where our brief was to design a city that was so fourth industrial revolution that it kick-started the fifth, and so that it could be sort of net zero, if not net positive, self-sustaining. The kind of place that might sort of 3D print lungs for transplants one day, and then perhaps
Interesting.
produce iPhone 21 the next. And that as like a set of challenges where you've got a real kind of blank piece of paper was just incredible. And they started construction now. We will see how it ends up.
Okay.
Another one more close to home, I'd say, is probably 22 Bishopsgate in London, looking at how effectively we could take a tower, which is Europe's largest commercial building. It was 4 years into a 5-year construction program, effectively retrofit a tower to meet the requirements that had changed in that period for a building that hadn't even yet finished construction. And then the last one I'd say in Dublin, my baby, the dock, which was Accenture's innovation centre, where we kind of sort of threw everything in the kitchen sink at it in terms of what IoT could do for the built environment. And I'm very proud of that project.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I feel like we should have a way. We should definitely think about a way to showcase these different buildings because the visual image would help. But once again, just moving on to the next question. So what's the secret to building or to becoming a smart building expert in your opinion?
Oh, I think to continually learn, to ask questions, and to go in with the expectation that you won't be able to know the answer, and that you're going to have to basically sort of network, uh, talk with people that might have skills sets that you wouldn't think of in order to make it happen. It's the bringing together of the skills from both the physical world and the digital world that I think really make it happen. So yeah, in summary, keep on learning because there's always something new.
That is very interesting that you say that because in-house at InEvent, we have one of the values, we have 10 different values, but one of the values that just our work and our everything that we do here are built upon or is built upon is keep learning. So the keep learning value is that we should always be looking for like new knowledge, evolving our processes and pursuing like more intelligent form factors. And how we describe it in-house that we should always be willing to learn something new, accept challenges, and develop new skills. And I feel like every single time, I don't know how it happens, every single time we have one of these conversations, one of these values just seems to make their way into the conversation as well. So yeah, thank you for that. That it's nice to see that synergy just come across in your work as well. And it's super interesting for those of us who work in-house at the company. But yeah, thank you for that. I think moving on to the next question and just speaking a bit more about safe smart buildings. In the past, as long as a building was safe, secure, and like could be adequately heated and cooled, it was seen as doing its job. But I guess in 2022, that's no longer the case. And in the future, the buildings are going to have to like consider net zero and like hold down their energy costs, counter the threats of terrorism and proliferation of gun violence, support the productivity of their occupants, and essentially buildings just have to become much smarter. Nice. And other considerations, like I mentioned before, is like, they have to be green, they have to be safe, they have to be productive. They also have to be economical to operate with clean energy sources. Occupant security and quality of life must be top priorities. And just so much other different things. Like they have to take in analytics and just follow so many different mega trends. So in your opinion, what are like how can we I'm trying to figure out a way that I can say this in such a way that, it kind of contextualizes that question. um what makes a building smart, I guess, is the simplest way to say it. Like what makes a building smart? So if these are the different things that we have to consider, in your opinion, what today makes a building really smart to you?
It's a place where the technology has enabled to build to the building to be something and to have meaning to somebody that it couldn't without technology. So let's take a workplace as a really good example. Today, real estate leaders are struggling with how do they deliver space that supports hybrid. I don't know who's going to turn up, when they're going to turn up. I don't know what technologies they're going to need to collaborate. I don't know what they're going to be doing. I don't know how many people will be in the room versus remote. And without technology, you couldn't manage that space. If it's to do with bookings, you wouldn't be able to sort of beam people in remotely. You wouldn't be able to kind of check that you're providing lots of fresh, healthy air so that infections don't spread. It basically gives you the X-ray glasses to see what's going on, and so that you can deliver somewhere that sort of meets all of those heightened expectations that you speak about.
I like that. I like that definition. So if it wouldn't make sense otherwise if the technology wasn't infused. So what kind of makes it smart in your opinion would be like the necessity of it, the necessity of the smartness, quote unquote, in the building.
No, I think it's the meaning that you have on it. The reason
Mm,
that I like my iPhone so much and the things that it can do is because it has a piece of functionality that, although loads of people use, does something very specific to me
mm,
that I
I
care
see.
about. If that's the ability to check on
I
whatever,
see.
or if I've
Yeah.
particularly kind of green conscious, the fact that I know
Yeah.
that the spaces are being balanced to who's using them, and that the building's doing the right thing by the planet. That means a lot to me and wouldn't
Yeah.
be achievable without the tech.
So it's personal utility more so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I think that answers that question. Um, so now I'm thinking just a little small scale. So the things that you've described have been like larger projects, especially the one in Saudi where you speak about like laying the template for the future and like producing all these incredible things. But now if we take it down more so to like a smaller scale and like even just homes and our daily lives, can we make our homes smarter with like small changes though? Like are there small changes that we can do to make our homes smarter?
I think so. And this might be the British in me that thinks that we should kind of train our homes with smart technology as if they were our butler. So I'm thinking about, a bunch of automations that kind of know what's going to happen and have preempted a need that we don't know that we have. So, for instance, it might be some lux sensors fitted to the outside of the property that will help it make a decision when to pull the blinds down so that it doesn't get too hot. Maybe it's some smart plugs that when you've got up in the middle of the night because you want to visit the loo, that it will, turn on the lights to sort of half brightness so you don't need to fumble for light switches and then it's far too bright and then you struggle to get back to bed. I think it's all of the little conveniences that you can add that make your home more sort of livable and adapt to what you're doing at that time. I think there's also an opportunity to do some cool stuff if that's around kind of lights or sounds, or if your home sings you happy birthday because that's something you've programmed in. I think you have quite a lot of fun with it.
I'm very curious just listening to that. And this is a question that probably is a bit more personal. Are there any like smart, like I guess, smart infusions that you have in your personal life for your home and like buildings that you are part of?
At home, I've got an air quality sensor, and I don't know why I'm so interested in it, but it basically helps me determine when I should open the windows and stuff.
Interesting. So how does
Yeah.
that go? Is that like an alert that you get? Does it like make a comment? I'm just very curious about these things.
Yeah, I've just got a little thing like a screen that sits under the TV that distracts me no end. It's probably entirely a placebo effect, but I really enjoy it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. As long as it makes you happy, honestly,
Yeah, 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 exactly.
I, I have several placebo effects in my personal life that I'm not going to go into. But yeah, I really wanted to know what that was about, and thanks for sharing that. Um, so another thing that I'll ask is like in your extensive career, what have been those five things? And this is what our topic was centered around. What have been those five things that you have learned from making mistakes? Because I know a lot of people speak about their successes, their accomplishments, things that they've, just they're really proud of. But we tend to shy away from mistakes. And I feel like mistakes is where a lot of like learning actually occurs. So what are five things in your career that you've learned from making mistakes?
Absolutely. And what a good segue. I will share my screen and I will basically talk you through some of the stories that I wanted to share on the kind of failure side of things. Let's just swap there to PowerPoint. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, I can see your
Lovely.
screen.
All right. So basically, this presentation came out of frustration attending a whole bunch of smart buildings conferences and everybody sort of talking about how wonderful their projects were, their software, the things that were going on. And I thought, well, that's not my experience. Am I really that bad at it? From talking to people privately, no. It's just that nobody was really brave enough to talk about it.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, it's kind of quick disclaimer in these stories, the client situations, technologies, and events that I present have been anonymized to protect
sure.
their modesty and also me. So it basically seems that in technology, it's okay just to sort of make it up. And the example is here from 2010. Facebook Zuckerberg says that the age of privacy is over, and there he is a couple of years later saying the future is private. Or we might do some stupid things in our design. I particularly like this one. This is the car that wants to kill you as it does an update when you're in your garage and it wants you to keep the engine on. But all fine, it's technology. And I think the expectation when people think about smart buildings is that it's all rainbows and unicorns, when given that as an industry, I think us in construction are sort of laggards to anything technology and innovation. I think the reality sort of feels a bit more like that. And that is a picture of me in a basement trying to work out I cannot connect to a building management system. And
The airing.
so,
I was about to say
sorry?
the airing is a nice touch. The
Yeah.
airing was a nice touch.
I'll tell you the sort of first story that I've kind of called "Crotch Cam Doesn't Build Trust." And we were working for a client here who knew that their office probably was a bit tired. It was lots of open plan desks. People weren't really working like that anymore. They were either working from home, and the sort of main reason they were coming into the office was to collaborate with people. So we know that we wanted to design the place totally differently, that was more about collaboration spaces than sitting down and concentrating. But anecdote wasn't enough in order to release the funding from their headquarters. So we wanted to basically prove that people would come in, put their coats and bags down at the desk, and then we'd never see them again. And the way that we were going to do that was to install some under desk sensors, which would basically look for like the heat that would come off a human to prove whether or not somebody was there. How we were going to do it on a weekend as not to get in anybody's way. And it was
Yeah.
all done with the absolute best of intention. But on the most important, when people came in, it was a bit of a conspiracy of enterprise scale upskirting, which was definitely
Oh my
not the
gosh.
case. So we had to have some crisis meetings about what we were doing, what the data was for, what
Conversations with HR.
exactly about what it could and couldn't see, and kind of go from there. So what I think I'd learned from that is be really upfront with what you're doing. If this is a project matters to you, it should matter to your people, and therefore it's safe to share your data. And for goodness sakes, never hide a sensor. It's just a bit creepy. The second one, speaking of kind of looking at what's going on downstairs, is that size in some cases really does matter. We're working for another building for another client somewhere else. We were going to install this really cool lighting system. It had sensors that could do daylight harvesting, which means it will only top up synthetic light in addition to what the sun isn't providing. It gives you a sort of Bluetooth network for turn-by-turn navigation. If you ever get lost in that space or you're new to it, it's able to help balance the kind of heating and cooling across. And we'd even received this lovely letter from a very famous technology company that they were using it in their space, and that essentially we would be silly not to use it. So that helped us that it was leading edge but not quite bleeding edge. So we felt a bit safe about that. And it was again, just to put the cherry on the cake, a really lovely story that the big corporate was going to be using a local startup for this solution. And the sort of solution architecture that we were sold, your luminaires connect to one single gateway in the building, which then transfers the data to the cloud, where you can control it. You can see how the space is being used, energy, just anything you could think of. It makes toast. It was going to be amazing. And when
Yeah.
we came to switch the thing on, this is what happened. It simply could not cope with the amount of data that we were putting through it, and we were left in a position that we had people moving in sort of 4 weeks' time. They were already homeless from their old office, and we were unable to even like turn the lights on and off because it didn't have switches because we were
Oh
supposed to
wow. Oh my gosh. That is a nightmare.
be a real situation. And we were left, we could start legal proceedings against the company, but that wouldn't really help because that would just kill them with them being so small. So we had to spend, let's say, 500,000 of our own money to help them re-architect the solution so that we could get something to work. And that kind of looked like this. We had a whole bunch of the luminaires going to a variety of different gateways this time, which would then go to a server, which would do all of the sort of beefy calculations and manipulations of the data there through some switching, and then through 3 different cloud layers before we were able to even turn the lights on and off. And we got there in the end. It was successful. But what I had learned from that is that you should always go see it in action so that you can talk to the people on the ground who actually have to use this solution, so that you can get all the things that people aren't brave enough to write down. I feel like an idiot that we didn't build a simulation to pretend to be 3,000 lights and chuck it at this gateway to see what's going. And as I sort of opened the presentation with, you should take everything with a pinch of salt when it comes to technology.
Just very quickly, I'd love to jump in there. I don't want to cut you off.
Go for it.
How do you bounce back from something like that? Because I personally look to build resilience, and part of building resilience is making mistakes and just owning them up and keeping like just keep going forward. I know the first reaction to that failure has to be just dejection. So how do you pick yourself back up from that?
I think when you've got a deadline, it helps because you don't have the
Fair,
time to stop and
fair
think
enough. Yeah, yeah,
about it and what it
yeah,
means. Um, I think also knowing the intention with which you work. Nobody sets out to be a dick. Right? So I know it wasn't personal in terms of what they were doing, and
yeah.
yeah, no, the deadline was the driving force. It was a character building, shall we say?
I can imagine. Sir, go on. I just really wanted to know that.
That's all right. The third one, then, I'm kind of calling reputation is everything. And again, we were instructed by a very famous mall to come and build their new wayfinding app for their customers. People were being lost between Gucci and Rolex, absolutely awful. So we tried to deliver an experience for them that would help pinpoint them and give them almost an internal satellite navigation to get to the place that they wanted to go. I'm totally looking at the wrong slide, so please excuse me. It sort of looks like that as an example of the sorts of technology. And they were desperate to get the thing sort of up and running as fast as they possibly could. Um, and we learned something about Bluetooth. So normally you put a bunch of beacons around a space that sort of tweet out who they are. Your phone listens to all those different signals and works out who's singing loudest, and that basically helps the phone determine where you are. But we learn in the malls in these double height spaces with lots of glass that Bluetooth actually works really weirdly, and it meant that people were jumping all over the place, and it, it didn't help. If anything, it got people more lost, and it was really tough to come back from. So we sort of had to do an update very quickly, almost to fake it, where you would say where you were and where you wanted to go to, and then it would play an animation of the route that you had to take until we found the sort of way to fix it, which was essentially increase the number of beacons and change the frequency ever so slightly to make it less bouncy, so that we could actually give them the experience that they wanted. And so with that, I think what I learned is try to work out why it's not been done in this context before. We've done it in hospitals and in offices which have a lot less glass and the heights are much lower, and it worked perfectly. So there's probably a reason why we've not seen it there before. I think it's also super important to have a bunch of safe people that you can test it on before it goes out for public consumption, and it is definitely worth fighting your client to make sure that that's the case, and also have a bit of a backup plan when things do go wrong, so that you can do something about it. The next one that I wanted to share was another one about reputation, which is more about a kind of workplace app. And it was going to be the workplace app to end all workplace apps. You could find like people by skill in it. It opened the doors for you. It had like some kind of cool questions to help build culture there. It did everything, and we had successfully built it. It cost us $1.5 million to get there, fully tested, except for one thing, which was a non-functional requirement, if you like. And we found out pretty quickly that it became known as the battery drain app. For whatever reason, it was gobbling through people's battery if they forgot to close it after using it. And
Yikes.
it meant that so many people just uninstalled it. And even though we got a fix out 2 weeks later that meant that it operated as normal, it was too late. The reputation had gone, and
Yeah.
all that time, effort, and development work was useless. So, we'd also learned some other interesting things from this, in that we had a community manager that was running the content on there, and she would do really odd things, like sort of send out notifications at 11 p.m. at night to basically say, "Oh, tomorrow we're going to have free ice cream in the office," and that was also a huge kind of turn off for people because it was after working hours, and
Yeah.
when you're in somebody's pocket, you have to be really respectful of those boundaries. I
Yeah.
think being subtle and not craving attention means that you're not going to get deleted because people just get fed up with you. And finally, there needs to be something beyond just the functional that keeps it fresh, that keeps people coming back to it. The next one is probably worth talking about how when you try to combine the digital and the physical worlds together, that they don't speak the same language. So we've called it Why Not All Waterfalls Are Pretty. And project management in the construction world is very much a waterfall methodology, because things have to happen in a certain order. The foundations go in before you put in the core, followed by the frame, the glass, the roof. Whereas in software, it doesn't matter. You can kind of shake it up, and that absolutely terrifies construction people, because they don't understand the sort of fundamentals that you can do things in any order that you like. When actually, I believe it's a bit of a secret weapon. All construction projects are delayed for one reason or another. And what this means is that you're able to then take the sort of software development team and get them to pivot what it is that they're working on, so that something can be prioritized or tested, or the non-critical element could be built whilst that delay is happening. So let's say we want to test, for instance, at the shopping mall, the turn-by-turn functionality. If there's a delay in the physical and the beacons haven't been installed yet, it means I could, rather than standing down the developers, I can get them to say build the login experience, and then we can come back and do that testing at a later date, which is super helpful, useful, and I think it just needs people to be a bit more open-minded about the different ways that we work. And then the last story I've called "It's Going to Be Okay, Hun," and I want to sort of prefix this with a quote that I absolutely love from a design agency called Fjord, that says expectations around how much people's personal data is worth became falsely inflated, and the mystery surrounding how it's used became a cause for concern. And I was seeing that we were getting a lot of pushback from these sorts of digital services that we were providing, be them in offices, hospitals, malls, etc., because people felt very untrusting of what we were doing with the data. COVID has kind of helped a little bit with that, because we've gone from you can't monitor what I'm doing, to a whole countrywide track and trace service. Yes, please sign me up. So I think people have got a bit more used to it. But certainly what I've learned from it is, in a lot of these situations, that we probably just need to get over ourselves. I'm not going to, people that run big establishments aren't going to do fundamental policy changes because of the way that one person behaves. It needs to be a kind of whole population size on that. So, thinking really big picture of it. And then also to kind of know where your risk level is. In the same way, kind of when I nip to the shops, I'm going to lock the front door. I think we need to think about that in terms of our data as well. There are some things where it's okay to leave the door open, others it needs to be shut fully. And so if we, thought about data in the same way we think about our front doors, then it's probably the most sensible thing to do. So, kind of summing all this up, the 5 things that I've learned from these times that I got smart buildings wrong was to really know the difference between cool and creepy in what you design. Like, it's really cool to be able to find your colleagues by the skills that they have, but it's a little bit creepy if you find them when they're in the bathroom. The second one would be, when designing stuff like this, keep quiet or be ignored. The kind of needier that your digital service is, the more likely it is that folks aren't going to use it. Trust is the absolute make or break of digital services. It takes a lot to earn it, and it's broken super easily. That we need to look beyond the glitter of sort of the cool things that we see and the great buzzwords, to really get behind what it actually does, how it works, and the fundamental requirements to making it happen. And although I've probably been on a bit of a Debbie Downer, because it's about mistakes, or a bit cynical, to go full circle to unicorns, I do genuinely believe that this technology will change how buildings work, the things that they deliver, and our relationship with them, and that we shouldn't be afraid to dream and have a bit of a play. And I suppose where it's sort of most difficult, and our biggest barrier to success on this at the minute, is that, as we spoke about earlier in the interview, the education of the built environment just hasn't kept pace with
Yeah.
industrial change. And that is the reason that I sort of set up Smart Buildings Bootcamp, really. We've got folks out there who are worried. They're expected to make multi-million-dollar decisions and have no formal training in the things that they're buying. They don't know which vendor they should trust or believe. They don't know enough to be able to call out errors in sales pitches, or they've never done it before. They really don't know how much things should cost. And that's why I think that if this is a syllabus, really helps give people a fighting chance to deliver the building that they've always like wanted to work in themselves, and really know what goes into making it happen. That's obviously, if we were to just have a quick look at the syllabus and all of the things that it includes to help you on the business side of it, the digital side if you're coming from a more traditional property world, or even the property side if you're a techie, bringing that all together massively helps. Or if, perhaps because it's content behind a paywall, I've also got a bunch of stuff that you can get for free on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Matthew Marson Presents. And yeah, I hope it helps you trying to get some technology into the built environment. And please do get in touch and tell me about the cool stuff that you're working on. It would be great.
For
Thanks.
sure, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm seeing the comment section going crazy with a couple people saying that these are just beautiful like insights and stuff in your presentation. And thank you so much. This has been enlightening in a lot of different ways, especially for someone like myself who, it wasn't smart buildings aren't something that I encounter all the time. So just to kind of like have, a peek into what the future looks like has been very, very interesting. And even segueing from that, I want to ask one question or a couple actually. So, what is the city of the future like? Like, what is that going to look like? In the when we would look at like cartoons and movies from the past or whatever, we would think about it as like maybe there would be flying cars, like in Futurama or Back to the Future. So, like, are we going to see flying cars or like should we expect something maybe a bit more subtle?
I think, yeah, we're going to see evolutionary change rather than revolutionary. And I think transport will probably be the first thing. I think we will see more mass transit options with new kind of train lines or other technologies being added, if that's Hyperloop, etc. But also loads more support in changes in planning and how we lay out roads and things for micro mobility. If that's your bike, one of those e-scooters or other, we will sort of see that the concept of the 15-minute community I think will probably stick more. And then lastly, I would say I think the big thing that we'll see is how we deal with waste and the onus on us as citizens to get the right type of material to the right place, as we try to recycle more locally. I think as we're starting to see that globalization is kind of coming to an end, we're going to have to start to repurpose things or make things locally, but using more fourth industrial revolution technologies. So if I can take some material back that then can go into a 3D printer of some sort, it doesn't mean that I can't have the things that everyone else has got globally, but my materials are now part of a closed loop. And you just program the thing that manufactures it and you get out what you like, almost like a replicator in Star Trek.
Interesting. I have to look that up because unfortunately I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan in the
What
world.
a Trekkie!
But
Oh my god.
I know it's quite unfortunate. I think I missed the wave of sci-fi movies and things that were growing up, so I don't really know that much. But I will keep that in mind. I'll actually make a mental note of it so I see what a replicator is like. Um, and just to close out, I think there's a couple more questions that I want to ask. So typically we take questions from the audience. One of the questions that came from an audience member is Mark, and he says, what is the major concern, if any, with smart homes? And I actually have that question as well because, like, when I think about like more automation and artificial intelligence, I think kind of a bit of like what Elon Musk has been preaching for a while, where he talks about like the robots are coming to take over. So, like, what are some concerns that you personally have with smart homes and things like that?
I think probably about being surveilled by, if that's a word, from big corporations that might want to sell us things. I
Mm,
think the Amazon Echo, we probably feel a little bit uneasy about as to whether or not we're being listened to in order to
yeah,
generate adverts for us.
yeah.
Uh, and then the second one I would say is probably around cybersecurity. If we haven't got the right processes and procedures and just like good rules of thumb to how you set things up in place, that perhaps your home could be overtaken by some nutter somewhere in the world, and it's like, I just want to switch the lights off.
Or use the bathroom.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you very much. Thanks for the question as well, Mark. That was very insightful. Um, so I think to end this off, because we actually have spent a bit of your time and we're so grateful that you joined us today. This has just been so fun and interesting and funny. Honestly, this has been one of the funnier talks that we've had, so I really appreciate you coming. But I'm gonna end on this. This is kind of like our go-to question when we sort of want to just close things out. Um, what are your three favorite books? Books that have might have influenced you, books that you thought were just interesting, books that you swear by, essentially. Three favorite books.
Yeah, the first one that I love is called Making Marks by Will Jones, and there's a sort of series of these, which is extracts from architect sketchbooks. It is such a great way to like see into the mind of how a designer's thinking. It reminds you that actually sometimes you need to go back to a traditional method in order to get that sort of new cool thing out there that perhaps technology and the way that we interact with it means it's really difficult to do on a screen in the first case, and just pick up sort of pen and paper. And some of the illustrations are just gorgeous, others are really scrappy, but they're also very successful in getting their idea across. I love it. Um, More on the sort of fiction side of things would be Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I really love my sci-fi. That's probably a reason I like smart buildings. It's
Fair
my way
enough.
to manifest it. I get really a sort of great story that with I don't even know that the technology is definitely there, but it doesn't take like a central role. It's more about the kind of politics that happen. It's just again a great series. And then the last one, which I think would be my holy text, Vers une architecture in the original French, or Toward a New Architecture, which was a manifesto written by Corbusier, who is my guy, and why I do what I do. It's got his 5 points of architecture. And sort of the stuff that he was doing at the time using technology back then, if that was reinforced sort of concrete, if it was taking shapes from ocean liners or airplanes, if it was to do away with the ornamentation of the time. Yeah, I think the 21st century version of it is what I've been lucky enough to work on. If that's buildings with semiconductors that have got parts of machine learning and artificial intelligence attached to them, mobile apps. Yeah, it's my sort of total inspiration and why I do what I do. That book. If only I
Thank
could like speak French and read it in the original language, eh?
you. Would you think that there'll be something that you'd have missed in translation, or is it just a brilliant book anyway?
Uh, I mean, it's a dense read. Don't get me wrong,
Ah,
but
fair
it's about the spirit that's in it. So
enough.
maybe it'll feel more poetic in French. I don't know.
Fair. I can kind of get your point now because yeah, there are those books that just seem to kind of drag on when they're translated to English. I've had a couple experiences with those in my life. But in the absence of any more questions from the audience, feel free to ask now because we're definitely gonna lose Matthew in a few minutes. So just if you have any more questions, drop them now. But in the absence of them, Matthew, it's been incredible having you on today. I don't think I've ever laughed this much during one of our in-event talks, and I'm not even saying this to flatter you. The crotch cam thing was was insane and hilarious. So thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your insights. I feel like in the future, when I come across smart buildings, this is going to come to mind, and hopefully we'll be able to use our toilets and our lights and stuff in the future without the threat of cyber terrorists or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much, man. This has just been incredible. Thank you so.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and thank you guys for joining us today. This has been a very insightful talk, and I'm so glad that you guys have been able to join one of our in-event talks today. From every place in the world that you've joined us, we deeply appreciate it. But this is not going to be the last one, and I'm sure we're going to want to have Matthew on in the future. So thank you once again, Matthew, for joining us, and thank you everyone at home or for wherever you're joining from today. This has been in-event talks. Until next week, we will see you again. Bye, guys.